The stars looked different from the bridge of the Zephyrian ship Astral Wind. Commander Vextar stood watching the endless black space filled with tiny lights. His blue skin had dark patterns that showed he was thinking hard. The ship moved quietly, through space, toward a planet that should not have any life on it. Dr. Kilnara walked up to him, holding a data pad. Her long fingers moved over the screen as she checked the readings again. She had been studying the signals coming from the planet for 3 days now. The planet was called Kepler 442b by the old star maps. It was supposed to be empty and dangerous. The planet had terrible storms that never stopped. The air was thin and hard to breathe. Most water was frozen under the ground. No smart life should be able to live there. But the signals were clear. Someone was down there and they were using technology. Vextar looked at the data on her pad. The energy patterns were strange. They were not like Zephyrian technology or any other species he knew about. The buildings showed up on their scans, but they looked simple, too simple for space travel. Yet somehow, these beings had gotten to this faraway planet. Cultural specialist Threnvort joined them at the viewing window. He was older than the others and had seen many first contact missions. His voice was calm as he spoke. The readings show at least 50,000 life forms. They live in 3 main groups spread across the southern continent. Their technology level appears low but functional. Security Chief Cordain came onto the bridge carrying his weapons belt. He always prepared for danger when they found new species. Many first contacts went wrong when beings felt threatened. His job was to keep everyone safe. The life forms show no signs of space travel capability. Their weapons appear primitive. They should not be a threat to our ship. Vextar ordered the ship to move closer to the planet. The storms looked terrible from space. Lightning flashed constantly through the thick clouds. The surface temperature readings showed it was very cold. How could anyone build a civilization in such a harsh place? Dr. Kilnara studied the biological scans coming from the planet. The life forms were bipedal like many intelligent species. They were smaller than Zephyrians, but seemed strong. Their body heat signatures showed they were active even in the cold weather. Something about their genetic markers seemed familiar, but she could not place it. The ship entered orbit around the planet. The storms were even worse up close. The lightning was so bright it lit up the entire atmosphere. The wind speeds were incredible. Yet the settlements below showed strong structures that had survived for a long time. Vextar opened the communications channel to try to contact the beings below. He used the standard first contact protocols that the Galactic Council had developed over centuries. The message was simple and peaceful. It offered friendship and help to any species that needed it. The response came faster than expected. The voice was clear and spoke in basic galactic common language. This surprised everyone on the bridge. How did these isolated beings know the common language used by space-traveling species? The voice identified itself as belonging to someone called Jake Morrison. He said he was the captain of something called New Haven Settlement. He welcomed the Zephyrian ship, but asked them to be careful of the storms when landing. He offered to guide them to a safe landing area. Dr. Kilnara ran the voice pattern through the ship's database. The results made her step back in shock. The vocal patterns matched an extinct species from the galactic records, but that was impossible. This species had been gone for over 200 years. She ran the scan 3 more times to be sure. Each time gave the same result. The beings on the planet below were humans. According to all official records, humans had destroyed themselves on their home planet called Earth. They had been a violent and unstable species that could not control their aggressive nature. The Galactic Council records said humans had ruined their planet with wars and pollution. They had made their world uninhabitable and died out completely. No human had been seen in the galaxy for centuries. Yet here was clear proof that humans still existed. Vextar felt confused and curious at the same time. If humans were still alive, why had no one reported seeing them? How had they gotten to this distant planet? Most importantly, why did the official records say they were all dead? The storm patterns below shifted, and Jake Morrison's voice came through the communications again. He gave them coordinates for a landing site that would be protected from the worst weather. He said their people were excited to meet visitors from the stars. They had been alone for so long. Dr. Kilnara prepared the first contact team while Vexstar made the decision to land. They would follow standard procedures and offer help to these surviving humans. But deep inside, he wondered what other lies might be hidden in the official galactic records. The shuttle moved through the violent storms toward the planet's surface. Lightning hit their shields again and again, but the ship stayed safe. Dr. Kilnara checked her equipment one more time. She had brought medical supplies and food synthesizers to help what she expected to be struggling survivors. Cultural specialist Threnvort carried translation devices and cultural exchange gifts. These were standard items for first contact with primitive species. He had dealt with many isolated groups before. Most were grateful for advanced technology and eager to join galactic civilization. Security Chief Cordain wore light armor and carried non-lethal weapons. The shuttle's scans showed the humans had simple projectile weapons, but nothing that could threaten their advanced gear. He was more worried about disease or environmental dangers than any threat from the humans themselves. The landing site appeared through the storm clouds. To their surprise, it was not a rough clearing or primitive landing pad. Instead, they saw a smooth metal surface with proper landing guides and safety barriers. The construction was simple but effective. Someone had built this with real engineering. Knowledge, Jake Morrison stood waiting for them with a small group of other humans. He wore clean clothes that looked practical rather than fancy. The other humans with him appeared healthy and well-fed. This was not what the Zephyrians had expected to find. Dr. Kilnara was the first to step off the shuttle. The air was thin but breathable with their breathing masks. The temperature was cold but not dangerous with their protective suits. The humans watched them with curiosity rather than fear or desperation. Jake Morrison stepped forward and spoke in clear galactic common. "Welcome to New Haven Colony. We are honored to meet travelers from the stars. We have dreamed of this day for many generations." His voice was calm and confident. He did not sound like someone who needed rescue. Mayor Lisa Carter joined the group. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She welcomed each Zephyrian by name after Jake introduced them. Her knowledge of proper diplomatic greeting surprised Threnvort. Most primitive species needed guidance on basic protocol. The shuttle ride to the main settlement took 20 minutes through carefully maintained roads. The Zephyrians saw farms with crops growing in protected domes. They saw power lines carrying electricity from some kind of generator. They saw children playing in safe areas while adults worked on various projects. The settlement itself was even more impressive. The buildings were well designed to handle the harsh weather. They had proper insulation and heating systems. The streets were clean and organized. People moved around with purpose and energy. This was clearly a thriving community. Engineer Ben Hughes met them at the main building. He was eager to show them the fusion power plant that provided energy for the entire settlement. The technology was not as advanced as Zephyrian systems, but it was solid and reliable. He had built it entirely from materials found on the planet. Dr. Kate Williams ran the research facility where they studied the local environment and developed new technologies. Her laboratory was well equipped and organized. She showed them hybrid crops that could grow in the harsh soil. She explained water recycling systems that captured every drop of moisture. Teacher Amanda Foster invited them to visit the school where human children learned reading, writing, mathematics, science, and art. The students were curious about the alien, visitors but not afraid. They asked intelligent questions about Zephyrian culture and technology. Their education clearly went far beyond basic survival skills. The Zephyrians spent the day touring the settlement and meeting the colonists. Everyone they met was healthy, educated, and optimistic about their future. These humans had not just survived on this harsh planet. They had built something remarkable. That evening, Mayor Carter invited them to dinner in the community center. The food was simple but tasty. It came from their own farms and food production systems. The humans shared stories about their daily lives, their hopes for the future, and their curiosity about life among the stars. Dr. Kilnara asked about their medical care and was shown a well-equipped hospital. The human doctors had developed treatments for diseases caused by the harsh environment. They had trained surgeons and nurses who could handle serious injuries. Their medical knowledge was impressive for an isolated group. Security Chief Cordine observed their community organization throughout the day. These humans had effective leadership systems and fair laws. They resolved conflicts through discussion and compromise. They took care of elderly and disabled members of their community. Their society was more stable than many advanced civilizations. He knew. Cultural specialist Threnvort was amazed by their arts and entertainment. The humans had maintained music, literature, and visual arts despite their isolation. They had theaters and libraries and museums. They celebrated holidays and festivals that brought the whole community together. They had not lost their culture while fighting for survival. As the day ended, Commander Vexstar felt deeply confused. Everything he had been taught about humans was wrong. They were not violent or unstable. They were not primitive or helpless. They were not extinct. They were living proof that the official galactic records contained serious lies. The question that bothered him most was simple. If humans were thriving in multiple settlements across this harsh planet, why did the Galactic Council believe they were extinct? Who had written those false records, and why? What other lies were hidden in the official histories of galactic civilization? The next morning brought new revelations that shook the Zephyrian team to their core. Colony leader Paul Richardson invited them to a private meeting in his office. The walls were covered with detailed maps and historical documents that told a very different story than the official galactic records. Paul was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much pain. He had been born on the generation ship that brought his people to this world. His parents had told him stories about Earth that were nothing like what the Zephyrians believed. Earth was not destroyed by human violence or environmental collapse, caused by human stupidity. Instead, it was attacked by unknown alien forces that used advanced terraforming weapons. These weapons changed the climate slowly over decades, making it look like natural disasters and human mistakes. The attackers were careful to make it appear that humans had destroyed themselves. They triggered volcanic eruptions that looked natural. They melted ice caps in ways that seemed like global warming. They poisoned water supplies that appeared to be industrial accidents. The real cause was hidden from human scientists until it was too late. Dr. Kilnara listened with growing horror as Paul described the exodus from Earth. Dozens of generation ships had been built in secret as human leaders realized their planet was being deliberately destroyed. Most ships lost contact with each other during the escape as the attackers tried to hunt them down. The New Haven colony represented survivors from just one ship. They had no idea if other human settlements existed anywhere in the galaxy. For 200 years, they had lived with the fear that they might be the last humans alive. They had worked desperately to preserve human knowledge, culture, and genetic diversity. Engineer Ben Hughes showed them records of the technology they had developed on Kepler 442b. The humans had not just copied old designs from Earth. They had invented new solutions for problems that Earth science had never faced. Their fusion reactors were actually more efficient than the ones they had left behind. The electrical storm harvesting system was completely original. No other species in galactic civilization had learned to capture and store lightning energy on such a massive scale. The metallurgy techniques using local ores produced materials stronger than standard galactic alloys. Human innovation had not stopped with the destruction of Earth. Dr. Kate Williams explained their agricultural achievements with obvious pride. The hybrid crops were not simple modifications of Earth plants. They were entirely new species created through careful genetic work over many generations. These plants could grow in soil that would kill most galactic food sources. The water recycling and atmospheric processing systems were masterpieces of engineering efficiency. They captured moisture from the air, processed wastewater, and even extracted drinking water from the underground ice. Their closed-loop systems wasted almost nothing while supporting 50,000 people. Teacher Amanda Foster shared the educational philosophy that had shaped their society. Instead of just teaching facts and skills, they emphasized critical thinking, creativity, and emotional intelligence. Human children learned to solve problems by working together rather than competing against each other. This approach produced adults who could adapt to new situations and find solutions that rigid thinking could not discover. It was why they had survived and thrived while other species with better technology might have failed on such a harsh world. The most shocking revelation came when colony historian Sam Walker opened his files about contact attempts with other species. For 50 years, the humans had been trying to establish peaceful communication with alien civilizations. They had sent radio signals, built beacon devices, and even launched small exploration craft. Every attempt had been ignored, rejected, or met with hostile responses. 3 times they had made direct contact with alien survey ships. Each time the aliens had either fled immediately or ordered the humans to stay away from galactic civilization. No one had been willing to listen to their story or verify their claims about Earth. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidence. Someone was actively preventing contact between humans and the rest of galactic society. Someone with enough power and influence to control first contact protocols across multiple species and governments. Dr. Kilnara realized that her own databases might contain falsified information about human biology and psychology. She began checking her research files against the real humans she was observing. The differences were enormous. Humans were far more adaptable, cooperative, and innovative than the records claimed. Security Chief Cordain studied their conflict resolution methods and found them superior to most galactic standards. Instead of punishment-focused justice systems, humans emphasized rehabilitation and community healing. Their crime rates were incredibly low, despite the stress of living in harsh conditions. Cultural specialist Threnvort was amazed by their approach to diversity and inclusion. The human colony included people from many different Earth cultures, but they had learned to work together while maintaining their unique traditions. They celebrated differences instead of trying to eliminate them. Commander Vextar felt a growing anger as he realized how thoroughly he had been deceived. The Galactic Council had not simply made mistakes about human extinction. They had deliberately maintained false records while real humans struggled to survive in isolation. This was not ignorance. This was conspiracy. The question was, who was behind it and why? What threat did humans represent to galactic civilization that justified this level of deception and isolation? Who had the power to suppress contact reports and maintain false records across multiple species databases? As the day ended, Vextar made a decision that would change everything. He would not report this discovery through normal channels, where it could be buried or explained away. He would find the truth about what happened to humanity and who was responsible for keeping them hidden from the galaxy. Commander Vextar returned to his ship that night with a mind full of questions and suspicions. He had Dr. Kilnara begin a secret investigation into the galactic databases while the rest of the crew continued normal operations. What they found in the classified files was worse than anyone had imagined. Dr. Kilnara discovered that multiple expeditions had encountered human settlements over the past century. Survey teams from 6 different species had filed reports about finding human colonies. Every single report had been classified at the highest security levels and removed from general databases. The reports told similar stories. Humans living on harsh worlds that other species could not colonize. Humans developing innovative technologies with limited resources. Humans building stable societies based on cooperation rather than hierarchy. Every expedition recommended establishing formal contact and trade relationships. None of those recommendations had been followed. Instead, The locations of human settlements had been marked as restricted zones. Ships were ordered to avoid those systems without explanation. Some expeditions had been reassigned to different sectors immediately after filing their reports. Security Chief Cordain used his military access codes to dig deeper into the classified files. What he found made his blood run cold. The hegemony had been actively working to eliminate human settlements whenever they were discovered. They used subtle methods that looked like natural disasters or random accidents. The hegemony was a secret alliance of the three most powerful species in galactic civilization. The Dominion, the Hierarchy, and the Federation controlled most trade routes, military forces, and political decisions. They claimed to maintain peace and order, but their real goal was preserving their own power and control. Cordain found evidence of biological weapons released near human colonies, diseases that looked natural but were actually engineered to target human immune systems, atmospheric processors that caused climate changes blamed on solar activity, mining operations that destabilized planetary geology, leading to earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. At least 7 human settlements had been destroyed this way over the past 50 years. Thousands of humans had died while the hegemony covered up their murders with false scientific reports. The survivors from destroyed colonies were either relocated to prison worlds or simply disappeared from all records. Cultural specialist Threnvort accessed diplomatic communications and found the real reason behind the conspiracy. The hegemony feared human influence on galactic civilization because humans represented everything they were not. Humans adapted quickly to new situations, while hegemony species relied on rigid traditions. Humans solved problems through cooperation and creativity, while hegemony cultures emphasized hierarchy and control. Humans treated other species as equals, while the hegemony maintained strict social castes. Humans shared knowledge freely, while the hegemony hoarded information to maintain power advantages. The hegemony leaders believed that human values would spread throughout the galaxy if contact was allowed. Other species would begin questioning why they needed authoritarian governments and rigid social structures. The careful balance of power that kept the hegemony in control would collapse. Dr. Kilnera found communications between hegemony scientists discussing human capabilities. They were particularly afraid of human adaptability and innovation. Humans could survive and thrive in environments that would kill other species. They could develop new technologies faster than established civilizations could adapt. Most dangerous of all, humans seemed to inspire other species to think differently. Several reports mentioned alien crew members who worked with humans beginning to question their own cultural assumptions. The hegemony saw this as a virus that would infect galactic civilization and destroy their carefully maintained order. Down on the planet, communications officer Ryan Brooks was monitoring galactic communication channels when he intercepted coded transmissions that changed everything. The messages were between hegemony agents discussing the Zephyrian expedition to Kepler 442b. They knew about the discovery of New Haven colony. The hegemony was already moving to cover up this latest exposure. A military task force was being assembled under the cover of a routine patrol mission. Their orders were to destroy the human settlement and eliminate any witnesses, including the Zephyrian expedition team. Ryan immediately contacted Mayor Lisa Carter and colony leader Paul Richardson. Within hours, every human settlement on the planet knew about the incoming threat. They also learned something that gave them hope. New Haven was not alone in the galaxy. Colony archives contained proof of contact with 12 other human settlements scattered across different star systems. The colonies had maintained secret communication networks for decades, sharing knowledge and resources when possible. They had been preparing for this day when their existence could no longer be hidden. Mayor Carter contacted the other colonies using encrypted quantum communication channels that the hegemony could not intercept. Within hours, she had confirmation that all 12 settlements were still active and thriving. The total human population across all colonies was over 2 million people. The human colonies had been working together to develop advanced technologies and defensive capabilities. They had mobile habitats that could relocate quickly if threatened. They had defensive weapons designed to stop hegemony attack methods. Most importantly, they had evidence of hegemony crimes against humanity. Dr. Kate Williams revealed that human scientists had been studying hegemony technology for decades. They had samples of the biological weapons used against previous colonies. They had recordings of hegemony communications discussing murder operations. They had enough evidence to expose the conspiracy to the entire galaxy. The question was how to get that evidence to species who could act on it. The hegemony controlled most official communication channels and could suppress any accusations made through normal diplomatic procedures. They needed allies who were already suspicious of hegemony activities. Commander Vexstar realized that the Zephyrian Confederation was the perfect choice. Zephyrians valued truth and justice above political convenience. They had enough military and economic power to challenge the hegemony if they chose to act. Most importantly, they were already witnesses to the lies about human extinction. The next morning, Vexstar called his crew together and shared everything they had learned. He asked each of them to make a choice that would define the rest of their lives. They could follow orders, report their findings through official channels, and watch the evidence disappear. Or they could take independent action to expose the truth and save human civilization from extinction. The choice was unanimous. Every member of the Zephyrian expedition chose to stand with humanity against the hegemony conspiracy. They would risk their careers, their freedom, and their lives to ensure that the truth finally came to light. The decision to act came when Communications Officer Ryan Brooks detected the hegemony task force entering the star system. 6 heavily armed warships were approaching under the false identification of a routine border patrol. Their real mission was the complete destruction of New Haven Colony and everyone who knew about its existence. Commander Vexstar had less than 8 hours to expose the truth before the attack began. He could not use normal Zephyrian communication channels because the hegemony would intercept and block any transmissions. Instead, he activated an emergency protocol that sent his findings directly to every Zephyrian world simultaneously. The protocol was designed for disasters like alien invasions or plague outbreaks. It bypassed all security filters and government controls to ensure vital information reached every citizen immediately. Using it without proper authorization was a serious crime, but Vexstar knew this was exactly the kind of emergency it was meant for. Dr. Kilnara had spent the entire night preparing a complete scientific report proving human survival and exposing hegemony lies. Her documentation included biological scans, genetic analysis, and technology assessments that proved human capabilities far exceeded official records. She also included evidence of falsified data in galactic scientific databases. Security Chief Cordain assembled military intelligence reports showing hegemony attacks on human settlements. His files contained intercepted communications weapons, analysis and tactical assessments that proved systematic genocide was being carried out. He identified hegemony military units responsible for specific attacks. Cultural specialist Threnvort prepared political analysis explaining why the hegemony feared human influence on galactic civilization. His report showed how human values of cooperation, equality, and innovation threatened authoritarian power structures throughout the galaxy. He predicted that many species would demand democratic reforms once they learned about human societies. The transmission began at dawn Zephyrian time across their entire confederation. Every news network received the complete files simultaneously. Every government official found the evidence in their priority communication channels. Every military commander got tactical intelligence about hegemony crimes. Every scientist received proof of falsified research data. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Zephyrian society erupted in anger at being lied to for centuries. Citizens demanded to know what other deceptions were hidden in their government databases. Military leaders questioned why they had been kept ignorant of an ongoing genocide. Scientists called for complete reviews of all galactic research. Meanwhile, on Kepler 442b, the human colonies were implementing their own survival plans. the settlements began emergency relocations to hidden sites deep underground and in remote mountain ranges. Mobile habitats lifted off from the surface carrying essential personnel and irreplaceable cultural artifacts to safety. Colony leader Paul Richardson coordinated the evacuation while maintaining communication with the approaching Zephyrian ship. The humans were not running away in panic. They were executing careful plans developed over decades of preparation for exactly this situation. Engineer Ben Hughes activated defensive systems that had been built in secret over many years. Power. Plants went into overload mode to create electromagnetic interference that would disrupt hegemony targeting systems. Decoy installations began broadcasting fake life signs to confuse enemy sensors. Dr. Kate Williams released biological agents that would make the planet appear uninhabitable to any species except humans. These organisms would create atmospheric conditions that looked like natural disasters but were actually protective camouflage. The planet would seem dead, while the colonies survived safely underground. The Hegemony Task Force arrived expecting to find a helpless, primitive settlement that could be easily destroyed. Instead, they encountered sophisticated defenses and a population that had vanished into prepared hiding places. Their attack plans were useless against an enemy that refused to stand still and fight. Worse for the hegemony, their attack was being broadcast live across Zephyrian space. Commander Vexstar had positioned communication satellites to record everything the task force did. Every weapon fired, every building destroyed, every attempt to hunt down human survivors was transmitted in real time to billions of witnesses. The Zephyrian Confederation Council met in emergency session to decide their response. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The hegemony had committed genocide while lying to allied species about their actions. They had falsified scientific data and suppressed contact with a thriving human civilization. Speaker Yelthan called for immediate military intervention to protect the human settlements. Defense Minister Korvac ordered Zephyrian fleets to deploy to systems where other human colonies were located. Foreign Minister Deltara began diplomatic communications with minor species who had also been deceived by the hegemony. The crisis grew rapidly beyond anything the hegemony had anticipated. They had expected to quietly eliminate another human settlement and continue their policy of suppression. Instead, they found themselves exposed before the entire galaxy with undeniable evidence of their crimes. Zephyrian military forces arrived at Kepler 442b within hours of the emergency transmission. The Hegemony Task Force found themselves surrounded by ships that were technically their allies, but were now demanding explanations for their presence and actions. Hegemony Admiral Corvin tried to maintain the cover story about routine patrols, but the evidence was too clear. His ships had been caught attacking civilian settlements while claiming to be on peaceful missions. His communications had been intercepted discussing genocide operations. His weapons had been recorded destroying human homes and facilities. The standoff lasted 12 tense hours before Admiral Corvin received orders to withdraw. The hegemony leadership realized they could not maintain their deception any longer. Too many species had seen the evidence, and too many governments were demanding answers. But the real revolution was just beginning. The exposure of human survival and hegemony lies had awakened something that could not be stopped. Across the galaxy, minor species began questioning the authority of their supposed protectors. The age of hegemony control was ending, and a new era of galactic democracy was about to begin. The withdrawal of the Hegemony Task Force marked the beginning of the greatest political upheaval in galactic history. Within days of the revelation about human survival and hegemony crimes, over 30 minor species had declared independence from hegemony protection agreements. The careful structure of galactic civilization was collapsing. Commander Vexstar became the unofficial ambassador between humanity and the growing alliance of species that rejected hegemony authority. His ship served as a meeting place where representatives from different worlds could coordinate their response to centuries of deception and oppression. The Andorian Republic was the first major power to formally recognize human sovereignty and demand justice for hegemony crimes. Their military fleets began patrolling human systems to prevent further attacks. Their scientists requested permission to study human innovations in technology and social organization. Dr. Kilnara worked with human researchers to establish joint research projects that would benefit all Alliance species. The combination of human creativity with alien resources and knowledge produced breakthrough discoveries in energy production, medical treatment, and environmental restoration within weeks. The atmospheric processors developed by Dr. Kate Williams could terraform dead worlds in decades instead of centuries. The fusion technology perfected by engineer Ben Hughes could provide clean energy for entire star systems. The agricultural techniques of human farmers could feed populations on worlds previously considered uninhabitable. Security Chief Cordain coordinated military cooperation between human settlements and their new allies. The defensive strategies developed by isolated human colonies proved remarkably effective against hegemony weapons and tactics. Other species began adopting human approaches to warfare based on mobility adaptation and cooperation. Cultural specialist Threnvort documented the social innovations that made human societies so stable and productive. The democratic institutions, educational systems, and conflict resolution methods developed by human colonies offered solutions to problems that had plagued galactic civilization for millennia. The human approach to governance was particularly revolutionary. Instead of rigid hierarchies with absolute authority, humans used flexible systems where leaders served the community rather than ruling it. Decisions were made through discussion and consensus rather than decree from above. Mayor Lisa Carter addressed the Alliance Council to explain human political philosophy. She described societies where individual freedom was balanced with community responsibility, where diversity was celebrated rather than suppressed, where innovation was encouraged rather than controlled by authorities. Her speech was broadcast across Alliance space and translated into hundreds of languages. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Citizens throughout the galaxy began demanding similar rights and freedoms in their own societies. The old order based on submission to authority was being rejected everywhere. Colony leader Paul Richardson revealed the full extent of human survival to the galactic community. The 12 hidden colonies represented just the beginning. Over the past 2 centuries, human exploration ships had established settlements in over 40 star systems. The total human population was approaching 10 million people. Each colony had developed unique solutions to local challenges while maintaining communication with other human settlements. They had shared knowledge freely and supported each other through disasters and difficulties. They had built a distributed civilization that could survive even if individual colonies were destroyed. The hegemony response was swift and brutal. Unable to maintain their deception, they abandoned all pretense of peaceful governance. Military forces under direct hegemony control began attacking Alliance worlds that had declared independence. The goal was to crush the rebellion before it could spread further. Engineer Ben Hughes worked with Alliance military leaders to develop new defensive technologies based on human innovations, shield systems that could absorb and redirect energy weapons, stealth technology that made ships invisible to hegemony sensors, communication networks that could not be intercepted or jammed. The first major battle occurred at the Rigel system, where hegemony forces attempted to destroy a newly independent colony. Alliance fleets using human technology and tactics achieved a decisive victory that shocked the galactic community. The supposedly invincible hegemony military had been defeated by an alliance of minor species. Dr. Kate Williams led scientific teams that investigated hegemony biological weapons and developed countermeasures. Her research revealed that many supposedly natural disasters throughout galactic history had actually been artificial attacks designed to eliminate inconvenient populations. The evidence of systematic genocide went back over 1,000 years. The hegemony had been eliminating species that refused to submit to their authority while claiming to be protectors of galactic peace. Hundreds of civilizations had been destroyed, and their deaths blamed on wars, plagues, or environmental disasters. Teacher. Amanda Foster established educational exchange programs between human colonies and alliance worlds. The goal was to train a new generation of leaders who understood democratic values, cooperation, and innovation. These programs became incredibly popular as young people embraced human ideals of freedom and equality. Communications Officer Ryan. Brooks coordinated information warfare against hegemony propaganda. The Alliance developed communication networks that could reach citizens on hegemony-controlled worlds despite government censorship. The truth about human survival and hegemony crimes spread rapidly through underground channels. The psychological impact of learning that humans were alive and thriving was enormous. For centuries, the galaxy had been told that cooperation and democracy were impossible for space-traveling civilizations. Humans were living proof that peaceful, prosperous societies could exist without authoritarian control. Commander Vexstar found himself leading diplomatic missions to species that were still undecided about joining the Alliance. His personal testimony about discovering human civilization and exposing hegemony lies carried enormous weight. Many worlds chose to rebel specifically because they trusted Zephyrian integrity. The momentum was building toward a final confrontation that would determine the future of galactic civilization. The hegemony still controlled the largest military forces and the most important trade routes. But the Alliance was growing stronger every day as more species joined the fight for freedom and truth. Colony historian Sam Walker began documenting everything that was happening for future generations. This was the moment when the galaxy chose between two very different visions of civilization. The outcome would determine whether future societies would be based on freedom or oppression, cooperation or domination, truth or lies. The war that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of massive fleet battles and planetary invasions, the conflict was fought through information networks, underground movements, and economic warfare. The Alliance had learned from human experience that direct confrontation was not always the best strategy. Human colonies served as safe havens and coordination centers for resistance movements throughout hegemony space. Their hidden locations and advanced defensive systems made them nearly impossible to attack successfully. More importantly, their democratic values inspired oppressed populations to demand freedom from authoritarian rule. Dr. Kilnara led teams of scientists who worked to reverse the damage caused by centuries of hegemony environmental warfare. Many worlds that had been declared uninhabitable were actually victims of deliberate ecological sabotage. With human terraforming technology, these planets could be restored to support life again. The project to heal damaged worlds became a powerful symbol of Alliance values. While the hegemony destroyed planets to maintain control, the Alliance worked to restore them for the benefit of all species. The contrast was clear to anyone willing to see the truth. Security Chief Cordine discovered that many hegemony military officers were beginning to question their orders. Evidence of genocide operations and systematic deception had shaken the loyalty of professional soldiers who had believed they were serving a just cause. Secret communications networks allowed these officers to share information and coordinate resistance. The first major defection occurred when Admiral Vosik of the Dominion Third Fleet refused orders to destroy a refugee convoy carrying civilian families fleeing hegemony territory. Instead, he escorted the refugees to safety and requested political asylum with the Alliance. His entire fleet followed his example. Cultural specialist Threnvort worked with refugee populations to document hegemony crimes and preserve the cultures of species that had been targeted for elimination. Many civilizations that were officially extinct had actually been driven into hiding or slavery. Their survival stories provided crucial evidence for war crimes prosecutions. The Alliance established mobile courts that traveled between star systems to investigate hegemony atrocities and provide justice for victims. These courts operated under human legal principles that emphasized rehabilitation and community healing rather than punishment and revenge. Mayor Lisa Carter became the spokesperson for the Alliance political movement that was spreading across the galaxy. Her speeches about democracy, equality, and cooperation were translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast through underground networks to populations living under hegemony rule. The response was overwhelming. Citizens on hegemony worlds began organizing peaceful protests, demanding democratic reforms. Workers went on strike to protest slave labor conditions. Students organized demonstrations calling for educational freedom. The hegemony faced internal collapse as their own populations rejected authoritarian control. Colony leader Paul Richardson coordinated diplomatic efforts to convince neutral species to join the alliance. His personal story of human survival against impossible odds resonated with populations that had also suffered under hegemony oppression. Many governments that had remained neutral began providing secret support to alliance operations. Engineer Ben Hughes developed new technologies that allowed alliance forces to disrupt hegemony infrastructure without causing civilian casualties. Power grids, communication networks, and transportation systems could be temporarily disabled to prevent military operations while leaving essential services intact. The most effective weapon was truth itself. Communications Officer Ryan Brooks led information warfare operations that exposed hegemony lies and documented their crimes. Every destroyed colony, every murdered population, every falsified record was revealed to galactic public opinion through Alliance broadcasting networks. Dr. Kate Williams made a breakthrough discovery that changed everything. Analysis of hegemony. Biological weapons revealed that they had been tested on prison populations and slave colonies for centuries. Millions of innocent beings had died in experiments designed to perfect genocide techniques. The evidence was so overwhelming that even some hegemony member species began to rebel against their own governments. The hierarchy faced civil war as their population learned about the atrocities committed in their name. The Federation experienced massive demonstrations demanding withdrawal from hegemony alliances. Teacher Amanda Foster established refugee education, programs that prepared displaced populations for life in democratic societies. Former slaves and political prisoners learned about individual rights, community cooperation, and peaceful conflict resolution. These programs created a generation of leaders committed to preventing future tyranny. The turning point came when the Dominion homeworld experienced a popular revolution that overthrew their government and declared independence from the hegemony. The sight of the most powerful hegemony member collapsing into democratic reform inspired similar movements throughout their territory. Commander Vexstar found himself commanding Alliance naval forces in the final campaign to liberate the last hegemony strongholds, but the battles were mostly symbolic. Most hegemony military units surrendered without fighting once they learned the truth about their government's crimes. The old hegemony leadership faced a choice between exile and prosecution for crimes against galactic civilization. Some fled to distant star systems, hoping to escape justice. Others chose to cooperate with Alliance investigators in exchange for reduced sentences. Colony historian Sam Walker began the enormous task of documenting the true history of galactic civilization. Centuries of lies and propaganda had to be corrected. The stories of destroyed species had to be told. The evidence of systematic oppression had to be preserved for future generations. The work would take decades, but it was essential for preventing similar tragedies in the future. Democratic societies needed educated citizens who understood the dangers of authoritarian rule and the value of freedom. As the war ended and Reconstruction began, humans found themselves in an unexpected position. The species that had been written off as extinct failures had become the inspiration for galactic democracy. Their survival and success had proven that cooperation was stronger than domination and that freedom was worth any sacrifice. 5 years after the fall of the hegemony, the galaxy was a very different place. The new Galactic Alliance had grown to include over 200 species committed to democratic governance and peaceful cooperation. The old systems of oppression and hierarchy had been replaced by institutions based on human ideals of freedom and equality. Commander Vexstar had been elected as the first Secretary General of the Alliance Council. His role was to coordinate between member species and ensure that no single government could dominate the others. The position rotated every few years to prevent the concentration of power that had made the hegemony possible. Dr. Kilnara directed the Alliance Science Foundation, which promoted research cooperation between member species. The combination of human innovation with alien knowledge and resources had produced technological advances that benefited everyone. Medical treatments, energy systems, and environmental restoration projects improved life throughout Alliance space. The terraforming technologies developed by human colonies had restored over 50 dead worlds to habitability. These planets became homes for refugee populations and growing communities of mixed species. The diversity of life and culture on these new worlds represented everything the old hegemony had tried to prevent. Security Chief Cordine led the Alliance Defense Force, which existed to protect member worlds from external threats and prevent internal conflicts. Unlike the old hegemony military, this force operated under strict democratic oversight and was forbidden from interfering in member government affairs. The defense of human settlements had evolved into a galaxy-wide peacekeeping mission. Alliance forces protected minority populations, prevented ethnic conflicts, and ensured that democratic elections could be held safely. Their success rate was remarkable because they operated with the consent and support of local populations. Cultural specialist Thren Vort established the Alliance Cultural Exchange Program, which promoted understanding between different species and civilizations. The program was based on human educational philosophy that celebrated diversity while building common values of cooperation and mutual respect. Exchange students from hundreds of worlds studied together in Alliance universities. They learned each other's languages, customs, and ways of thinking. They formed friendships that crossed species boundaries and created networks of cooperation that strengthened the entire alliance. Mayor Lisa Carter had become president of the Human Colonial Federation, which represented all human settlements in alliance politics. Her government was committed to sharing human innovations freely while learning from other species. The isolation that had once threatened human survival was now completely ended. The Human Colonial Federation had grown to include settlements on over 100 worlds. Each colony maintained its unique character while participating in the larger human community. The diversity of human societies provided examples of different approaches to democracy and freedom. Colony leader Paul Richardson served as director of the Alliance Historical Commission, which investigated hegemony crimes and preserved the true record of galactic history. His work had documented the destruction of over 300 species and the oppression of countless others over the past millennium. The Commission's findings were taught in schools throughout Alliance space to ensure that future generations understood the dangers of authoritarian rule. Democratic education became the foundation of Alliance society as citizens learned to think critically and participate actively in their governments. Engineer Ben Hughes led the Alliance Infrastructure Development Program, which built communication, networks, transportation systems, and energy grids to connect member worlds. These projects were designed to promote trade and cooperation while preventing any single government from controlling essential services. The technology sharing agreements between Alliance members had created unprecedented prosperity. Worlds that had struggled under hegemony exploitation were now thriving centers of industry and innovation. The economic success of democratic societies provided a powerful example for remaining authoritarian governments. Dr. Kate Williams directed the Alliance Environmental Restoration Authority, which worked to heal the ecological damage caused by centuries of hegemony warfare. Her teams had developed techniques for cleaning polluted atmospheres, restoring extinct species, and rebuilding damaged ecosystems. The environmental projects became symbols of Alliance values. While the old hegemony had treated planets as disposable resources, the Alliance worked to preserve and protect the natural heritage of every world. This approach created sustainable prosperity that could last for generations. Teacher Amanda Foster established the Alliance Democratic Education Institute, which trained teachers and administrators for schools throughout member space. Her curriculum emphasized critical thinking, creativity, and civic participation as essential skills for democratic citizenship. The education programs had produced a generation of young people who took democracy for granted and could not imagine living under authoritarian rule. These students became leaders in their communities and ensured that democratic values would continue to spread and strengthen. Communications. Officer Ryan Brooks led the Alliance Information Service, which provided news and education to populations throughout the galaxy. His networks reached even non-member worlds, where authoritarian governments tried to suppress information about Alliance success. The free flow of information had become one of the Alliance's most powerful tools. Citizens who learned about democratic alternatives to authoritarian rule began demanding similar freedoms in their own societies. The remaining dictatorships found it increasingly difficult to maintain control over educated populations. Colony historian Sam Walker completed his comprehensive history of the galactic revolution that had transformed civilization. His work documented how the discovery of human survival had exposed hegemony lies and inspired the democratic movement that freed billions of beings from oppression. The most important lesson from the revolution was that ordinary people working together could overcome even the most powerful tyranny. The Alliance had succeeded not through superior weapons or advanced technology, but through the simple human values of cooperation, truth, and justice. On New Haven Colony, children from dozens of different species played together in the same parks, where the first contact between humans and Zephyrians had taken place. Their parents worked side by side on projects that would benefit the entire galaxy. Their teachers came from many worlds, but shared the same commitment to democratic education. Commander Vexstar often visited the Memorial Garden, where the names of destroyed species were carved in stone. The monument reminded Alliance citizens of the cost of tyranny and the value of the freedom they now enjoyed. It also honored the courage of those who had fought and died to make that freedom possible. The galaxy was not perfect, and problems remained to be solved. Some worlds still lived under authoritarian rule. Poverty and inequality persisted in many systems. Environmental damage would take generations to completely heal. But the direction of change was clear and positive. The discovery of human survival had changed everything, not because humans were superior to other species, but because they had proven that democracy, cooperation, and freedom were possible for any civilization willing to embrace them. The future belonged to societies that celebrated diversity, encouraged innovation, and treated all beings with dignity and respect.